There is no faithful Christianity that does not say that God's grace and his care encompasses all of his creation, that he desires for all of it. It should not be a surprise to us then when we come to Revelation and there is a new heavens and a new earth. That he desires, actually, he made this physical world, dirt and all, and he's committed to it. We see this in the whole flood story. The flood story, like I've said, of course, is a judgment on evil and sin and rebellion, but it is also a commitment of God to his creation that he has made. And part of what you see actually in the flood story is the reiteration of the 6 days of creation, and actually the creation story. Let me try to explain this. I don't think this is too hard to get, but it's getting a little in the weeds. So last week, I tried to show you that the main focal point of the story, the point where the big picture chiasm is pointing to, is the turning point that begins chapter 8, verse 1, when it says, "But God remembered Noah." Right after that verse, it says, "And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided." The word wind there is the Hebrew word ruah. Anybody know what the word for spirit is in Genesis 1, verse 2? Ruah. What's the ruah in Genesis 1 doing? Hovering over the waters, right? Is the earth here covered with water? Yes. The waters have yet to recede, right? So you have this parallel thing happening in the pre-creation in a way. Here it is over the earth, but the earth is covered with water. The pre-creation in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 is said to be of the deep. The same word again is used in 8, verse 2 there. In chapter 8, verse 6, we read that after 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark. What happens when you open up a window in an ark? Light would have come into the darkness, right? And we read, of course, that also that the waters subsided. What would the waters subsiding do but then allow the water to be below the earth and then the clouds to be above the earth, and the firmament is then seen again and recreated again in a way. And that would create, of course, the waters above, the earth beneath, just like we find in Genesis 1, 6, and 7, and then in verse 9. So what we have is we have pre-creation in a way, with the Spirit moving over and hovering over the waters, and we have a retelling of day 1, 2, and 3 of creation. And in that order, we have that. Now, day 4 is the creation, you might remember, of the heavenly beings, the lights, the stars. And remarkably, that's actually sort of absent here. Bruce Waltke, some of you might know Bruce Waltke. He's taught at many of the great seminaries of our day. He's still living. He's 94, one of the greatest scholars of Genesis. He says, well, we should almost expect that that's not going to be in this picture because we're dealing with earth, and they exist in the heavenly spaces. So no issue there. But if you continue on, the waters recede, and Noah sends out birds. And this is what happens on the 5th day of creation. There's the swarming things in the sea, and then there's the birds in the heavens. Okay, that's the next thing that happens. Then you have the 6th day with the appearance of man and his wife, and every living creature and every creeping thing that moves along the ground or the earth. And this is what happens. These are the exact same phrases that we see in the 6th day of creation in Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. They are repeated, the exact same phrases. Then what do you find? Well, you have the reinstitution of the creation blessing, which is be fruitful and multiply, which begins chapter 9 of Genesis. What I'm saying is that this whole story of Noah and the flood is teaching us that God is absolutely committed to his work of creation. The effects of sin on it will not be the final story for his creation. He's committed to all of it, to the waters and to the land and to the birds and the creepy things, and to his creation of humankind, to all of it. God keeps covenant with his creation. But it's more than that. This text is telling us that God keeps covenant with us, with humanity and with his people, okay? That is also very, very present here. But first, okay, when we get to chapter 9, so we've built our way up to chapter 9. We've gone through these days of creation. When we come to chapter 9, we first have this little section, and that section, verses 1 through 7, if you have your Bible open, is got this, what's a literary term is the inclusio. It's an envelope that makes you look at it all together. And it actually begins in verse 1 and then it ends in verse 7 with this creation blessing, be fruitful and multiply. You'll see that in both of those verses there. But these verses are highlighting again for us how humanity is unique among all of creation. And unique in a way that it is above creation. Verse 2 tells us that the living things of the earth are delivered into the hand of humanity. That's what the end of the verse says. They're delivered into your hand. Verse 3 and 4 tell us that God has given not just the plants for our food, but every living thing. Humanity is over it. And yet also what it's telling us is you have to respect it. You probably noticed all the reference to blood. Many ancient cultures, and of course there are some today, that would drink blood. They would offer sacrifices and they would drink blood. And often the idea was you're getting the power of that thing, that living thing into you by doing such an act. And God says this isn't supposed to be the case for you. You're supposed to understand that blood represents life and you're supposed to tend for and care for life. Don't do that. He says very specifically, you must respect human life. Do not kill other humans. He says that very, very emphatically.